Okay, so we are going to start our reading on page 291. War begins in Europe. We're going to see how far we can get through with the reading. Whatever we get through with the reading, that's what you need to get through with your chapter comprehension page. In 1914, an assassin killed a member of Austria's royal family. Austria-Hungary responded by declaring war against Serbia, the country it held responsible for the killing. Oh, Archduke Franz Ferdinand.
Yeah.
That's who was killed in Austria-Hungary, and it's called the shot heard round the world because he was shot, and that's what sparked the beginning of the Great War. So this assassination was like the final straw that everything crumbled from there. Colin.
So I assume that they got mad and then the Allies joined in.
Good guess. That's what we call an educated guess. We were talking about allies, and having that allied system can lead to big wars. So Colin's saying, well, Austria-Hungary declared war against Serbia, but it's not just those two countries in war. Now all of a sudden their allies are going to get involved. Andrea?
No.
Okay. The conflict, however, did not stop there. Austria-Hungary and Serbia both had alliances with other countries. One by one, the nations of Europe joined the fight. Before long, the entire continent was at war. So when we see that list for the Allies and the Central Powers, it's not just those countries. All the countries in Europe ended up taking sides. These were just the big ones. On one side were the Allies, on the other side were the Central Powers. Beginning in 1914, the Allies and the Central Powers fought dozens of battles against each other. Many of the brutal battles took place in France and Germany. Millions of soldiers and civilians were killed. Edward?
Who was on who? The Allies versus Hungary?
So look at the definitions. It's what we were talking about at the beginning in key terms. So the big main Central Powers were Germany, Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. The big main Allied powers were Great Britain, France, Russia, Italy, and the United States. Other countries also participated. These were the big leading forces. They had the biggest militaries. They were the biggest forces. Because obviously Serbia was involved, because that's who Austria-Hungary declared war on. So would Serbia be on the Central Powers or the Allied power side? The Allies, because Austria-Hungary is a Central Power. So Serbia then would be an Allied power, or an Allied force. Peyton.
Is Siberia and Serbia two different countries?
Yes. Siberia is not a country. I think it's a region in Russia. So it's like the super cold portion of Russia. And Serbia is a specific country. America's response to war. When the war began, most Americans and most Minnesotans wanted the United States to stay out of it. Of course, this is happening over in Europe. They're fighting for power over in Europe. We're across the ocean. We don't need to go to war because we know from what we've been learning, wars are not glory. It's not an amazing experience. Wars are nasty, and we don't need to be a part of it if they're fighting for their power. They felt there was no need for the United States to get involved in the issues of European powers. There were some Americans, however, who believed the United States should join the war on the Allies' side. They worked hard to change other people's minds. Americans, they argued, could no longer afford to ignore what was happening in Europe. These people claimed that the powerful weapons of modern warfare, especially airplanes and submarines, threatened America's security and economy. Because does America just deal with American companies? No, we trade with Europe. So if we're sending our ships over to Europe with our supplies that we want to sell there and they get attacked because we're in the open water, now all of a sudden it's affecting us. It's affecting our economy. If we can't buy from Great Britain because Great Britain is at war, it's affecting us. So the power struggle going on, we wanted to stay out of, but it's affecting our economy. It's affecting our trade with the countries over there. And some of the Central Powers are going to they're going to start attacking our ships that we have, not because we have soldiers on them, but because they're trying to hurt their enemy's economy, which in turn hurts our economy. Through 1915 and 1916, the war raged. Concern among Americans increased as rumors spread about German soldiers torturing and killing Belgian women and children. This happens in wartime. Soldiers make really bad choices. And it's happening in Ukraine right now. People are attacking civilians. And so now there's it's war crimes. Oh, we need to hold these soldiers accountable. We need to protect these civilians. It happens in every war. So it was happening during World War I. Finally, when German submarines started attacking American ships, the U.S. government decided it could no longer stay neutral. In April of 1917, President Woodrow Wilson called for action. The U.S. Congress agreed and declared war on Germany and other members of the Central Powers. Most Minnesotans, even those who wanted the United States to stay out of the war, were eager to support their country once war was declared. So their patriotism comes out. There's, okay, even though I don't like war, I don't want to go to war, but it's a necessity, and our country is going to war, I'm going to be loyal to my country. I'm going to be patriotic and supportive. Harold Knudsen of St. Cloud was one of 4 Minnesota congressmen who voted against the United States entering the war. However, when the voting was done and the country was officially at war, Knudsen urged all Minnesotans to put aside their objections and concerns. He believed everyone should join the war effort. This is your fight and mine, he said. Many of us were opposed to war at this time, but we bow to the wishes of the majority. It's our country. We are united, and we need to support what our country is doing. Proving loyalty. Before 1917, many people in Minnesota believed that the war in Europe was a foreign conflict that the United States should avoid at all costs. Although most of them changed their minds once the United States joined the war, some remained against it. Those who raised questions about the war were often accused of being unpatriotic and disloyal to their country. Throughout the nation, the U.S. government launched a communication program using propaganda, posters, parades, songs, and other methods to persuade Americans to support the war effort. So we talked about that propaganda. It's persuasion, using all the persuasion you can. So they found different ways to persuade people to be patriotic. The government encouraged people to show their patriotism by buying war bonds, which were sometimes called Liberty bonds or Uncle Sam's bonds. The government sold war bonds to Americans in order to raise money to pay for the war. Shortly after war was declared, the Minnesota legislature created the Commission of Public Safety, CPS, to oversee the state's war effort. And I think now you might hear the term CPS, and it stands for Child Protective Services. Very different organization. Okay, so this CPS is the Commission of Public Safety. Okay, so it's different, very, very different. It was just around during World War I. The legislature gave the CPS the power to make and enforce laws in Minnesota. It was best known for cracking down on Minnesotans suspected of disloyalty. Its definition of loyalty was simple. The test of loyalty in war times is whether a man is wholeheartedly for the war and subordinates everything else to its successful prosecution. That meant people were expected to make winning the war their main concern above everything else in their lives, which is very interesting. So think about maybe you weren't so supportive of the war. You're very anti-war because it's killing, and we're against killing. And maybe you want to say, I wish we weren't at war. Even just voicing those opinions might get you in trouble because it's seen as being disloyal. So this is interesting on where this is going to go. Germany was one of the countries that the United States was fighting against. So German Americans and German immigrants were among the CPS's targets. So they're saying, ooh, they came over from Germany. They have German ancestry. They might be spies. They might be up to no good. The CPS pressured schools to stop teaching German. When my brother was in high school, he took German as a language. They stopped it during the war because they didn't want to show any support of Germany. It censored or limited what German language newspapers could write. It discouraged German music. It's the polka. You wouldn't be able to do polka dancing. Because so many people in Minnesota were of German descent, the actions of the CPS affected many. My family, I have German ancestry on both my mom and my dad's side. So this would have affected my great grandparents, would have been affected by this because they were German living here, actually living in Wisconsin, but a lot of Minnesotans are the same ancestry as Wisconsin. So they would not be able to celebrate their culture, their customs, like we've talked about how immigrants were able to balance Americanizing and keeping their homeland. They couldn't do that. They had to stop doing anything German. Some Minnesotans responded to the anti-German mood by changing their German names. Families with names like Schmidt tried to prove their loyalty by adopting the name Smith. So they changed the sound of their names so they didn't sound German anymore. People no longer referred to sauerkraut by its German name. Instead, they called it Liberty cabbage. I love sauerkraut and brats. That's what I've grown up with. Has anybody ever had brats and sauerkraut? Yeah, that's a very German thing. Okay, bratwurst is a great sausage to eat, like a hot dog. Put some sauerkraut on it. It's very German. But they wouldn't call it sauerkraut. How many of us have heard of sauerkraut? Whether or not you eat it, you've heard of sauerkraut.
I've made it before.
I wouldn't have known what Liberty cabbage was. That's kind of a crazy name. But because it's a German name for that cabbage, they wouldn't use it. Wow. Andrea, what did you want to share?
It happened to the Japanese immigrants in World War II.
Yes.
But it was like so much worse. They were like sent to internment camps.
Yes.
And they had like
Yes, in World War II it was the same thing, but with Japanese Americans. And we'll see that throughout. There's always a fear of the people that come from that area. It happened after 9/11. People were afraid of Middle Eastern people. So there's always that fear in all the wars of the people that come from that country. Colin.
Which World War is
World War II.
But then isn't that the Japanese that bombed Pearl Harbor?
That was World War II.
It's both.
So,
The Japanese.
So-
How do they come together?
Because the alliances always change. So in World War II, they called them, it was the Allies and the Axis powers. So the Axis are Germany, Italy, and Japan were the big main Axis powers. So they come together. And we'll see as we go through the chapters how that comes to be. All right, in the summer of 1917, anti-German feelings reached a new level. German Americans in New Ulm held a peaceful meeting to discuss the war. The speakers talked of loyalty to the United States and the importance of obeying laws. Yet, they also felt unable to fight against their own relatives in Germany. Because a lot of times when you leave your home country, not the entire family comes. Mr. Gambino's dad still has family over in Italy. So Mr. Gambino has an aunt and uncle over there, lots of cousins, and distant relatives over in Italy. He wouldn't want to fight against his own cousins. They agreed to ask the government not to send their young men overseas. This did not sit well with many Minnesotans. It's going to be seen as very disloyal. Newspapers around the state called the people of New Ulm traitors. Governor Joseph Bernquist even removed the German-American mayor of New Ulm from office because he feared the mayor was disloyal. Soon, immigrants from many different countries, not just those from Germany, discovered their loyalty was being questioned. The CPS ordered all Minnesotans who were not American citizens to register with the state. So they had to sign in that they were of German descent. Or they had to sign in because they weren't American citizens. They had to fill out forms disclosing where they lived and worked, how much property they owned, and why they had not become citizens. So it'd been okay up to this point to not become a citizen. That's fine. You're still working here. You're Americanizing a little bit. It's okay to not be a citizen. Now all of a sudden they're seen as scary and disloyal. Please stop. The CPS also cracked down on other people and organizations that it suspected of being disloyal. It launched investigations, banned political rallies, and publicly accused some groups of being traitors. We'll see there's the poster there, how can I help my country? So that's kind of some propaganda that they're trying to get people to fight for the country. Patriotism questioned. One group targeted was the Industrial Workers of the World, IWW, a labor union whose members included iron miners and lumberjacks. Another was the Nonpartisan League, a political organization of mainly Minnesota and North Dakota farmers. Nearly all the members of these groups considered themselves patriotic Americans, but they did question some of the government's actions during the war. In this atmosphere of fear and distrust, some Minnesotans participated in bullying and mob violence against members of the IWW and the Nonpartisan League. So just because they were in that group, people were fighting them. Nils Hockstad, a farmer who lived near Hinckley, found out the hard way that it could be dangerous to support a group labeled as disloyal. When he tried to give a speech in support of the Nonpartisan League in the spring of 1918, a gang of masked men grabbed him and hauled him away from the event. Hockstad refused to be silenced. 2 days later, he returned to give another speech before a crowd of 750 cheering farmers. Clearly, some Minnesotans believed it was possible to support the Nonpartisan League and still be a patriotic American. As time went on, some Minnesotans concluded that the CPS had too much power. Ambrose Teague, a lawyer on the commission, was among those who felt the CPS had gone too far. They were abusing their power. They were cracking down too much. Because it is America. We should have the freedom of speech. That's in the Bill of Rights. And now people can't say anything against the war. He came to believe this even though he was one of the people who had originally started the CPS. He spoke out saying that the CPS's actions during the war showed how dangerous it is to give even good men too much power. By February of 1919, the Minnesota legislature had shut down the agency. So the agency took things too far. We have the loyalty tested in New Ulm, blue box, and then the yellow box, patriotism, then and now. You are going to need to read on your own. We have our war begins in Europe and proving loyalty, numbers 4 and 5 and 6. I forgot to put the number 6 there. These should be filled in. So you should be done with number 6, ready for one county's contribution for tomorrow. So we'll read about one of the counties in Minnesota, what they did for the war for tomorrow. So you do have homework if you did not complete all of these questions. You should have them all done by tomorrow. So with that, we're going to say goodbye to our friends at home. We hope you are well, and we hope to see you soon.